Hello everyone, welcome to the table. What I want to do today is go over this new set of rules I'm playing. It's not a new set of rules, it's new to me, but it's Battle of the River Plate. It's part of the Battleship Captain rules by Minden Games, and Battleship Captain is the full rules game, so it's World War II ships, which is great because I like the World War II ships. And I got this just because it keeps calling to me, just, try me out, try me out. And so I wanted to share with you some things here as I go about learning the game. And the basic book here, this is like the basic rules, the introductory rule set. It has some, I don't want to say so much like advanced rules, it has some kind of advanced rules, but the full Battleship Captain rules comes with like all the rules, and then there are advanced rules too. So there can be a bit of complexity that you can add in. Aircraft, torpedoes, things like that. Now the basics that I'm focusing on, because it's the easiest for me to learn when I do World War II sets, is just moving and then shooting like the main guns. And so that's what I've been focusing on. And it's not that bad. It's actually pretty good. So like if I was to summarize the rule set, I'd say it's a good kind of beer and pretzels kind of game, but it does it feels good though. Like I've played a couple rule sets that were just way too simple. This has a little bit of a balance there of what feels right and then complexity of rules. So the rules really aren't that difficult, but it kind of feels right as far as like the shooting and the damage accumulating and things like that, without a lot of rivet counting. And by rivet counting, that's for the simulationists that really like to have, gun caliber, armor penetration, angle of shot, and those things. This kind of simplifies that. But again, still kind of gives you that feel of, well, that makes sense. So this Battle of the River Plate, I got this off War Game Vault. It's the PDF. So the Battleship Captain rules, that's actually a printed book. I haven't found that in PDF because I would have just bought that, because that comes with more ships and the full rules. But I thought I would just give this a try to see if I even want to get Battleship Captain, and I've gone ahead and put that on my Amazon wish list. So somewhere down the road I'll probably pick up Battleship Captain. And then they have a whole separate book of ship counters, which I'll show you here in a second, which I thought this was kind of clever too. So anyway, Battle of the River Plate, you've got this battle book. It's the introductory rules to their Battleship Captain line. This is second edition, and as far as I know, this battle book, Battle of the River Plate, is just in second edition, but the full Battleship Captain rules are in a third edition. Alright, so what all is in here? So I'm just flipping through here, table of contents, how to use the book. It tells you a little bit about the battle game book system, summary of the historical battles. So there's a lot of information here specifically relating to the Battle of the River Plate, since that's the name of the game. So you got your historical notes. Looks like a plotted chart of the battle there, quite a bit of maneuvering. And then you pop into the rules. And the rules aren't that many pages, but it comes out here, talks about scale. So with this game, they're measuring at 1 inch is 500 yards, which actually works really good on my 6x4 table. I was able to keep, because what I did was I didn't do Battle of the River Plate. This actually has ship stats, so you can also do other engagements, including Battle of Denmark Strait. I just got done assembling and painting my Hood and Prince of Wales, and I already had a Prince Eugen and Bismarck just so I could play that battle, and this rule set will let me do that. But that let me keep the two fleets, not much in the way of fleets, but let me keep those two groups of ships pretty much at the far ends of the table, and they got to shoot at each other. And it felt fine, And what I mean by feeling, it's where you're kind of taking that idea of your scale and range and movement, and the shots at long range, and it slowly moved into medium range, which was still at like 20,000 yards for the game. I was still getting a lot of misses, and the ships didn't have a need to want to get closer, so they were just kind of moving about the edges of the table. That was fine. The only problem is that took the Prince Eugen out, because the way the rules are set, the Prince Eugen as a cruiser, it just was completely ineffective at that range. Like almost completely ineffective. which makes sense because it had much smaller guns than, say, the 14 and 15-inch guns of like the Bismarck and Hood and Prince of Wales. So that's why I was saying it has a feel pretty good. Now, the game, another cool thing about this game system is you see a counter, and this could be played with these counters. And I printed these out just on paper. I didn't card stock them or anything fancy, but all the information you need for the ship is on this counter. So if you don't have your own miniature ships, the game provides counters that you could use. You could cut these out and then run these on the table. You know, you could mount them on thick cardstock or whatever you have available, and then with all your ship stats, you just move those along the table instead. And they're like a 1 to 4500 scale. So it's pretty close to folks that game in like the 1 4800 scale. So bigger than the 1 6000, not as big as, you know, the 1 2400, which is what I got with GHQ. But again, if you just want to get into naval wargaming, this is actually a really good way to do it. A decent set of rules and ship counters, so you can start without having to buy a bunch of stuff. Now, because I had the miniatures I wanted, I didn't cut the individual ships out. I just left them here on this piece of paper, and then all the ship stats you need to play the game are right there on the counter. So that's, I thought, was a really cool thing. So what exactly are we looking at as far as the stats? Well, let's just zoom in here. Okay, I'm going to take you on a ride. This is going to get shaky for a second. There we go, and hopefully that stops wobbling here in a second. Alright, what you're looking at is, let me just turn this off so there's no distracting backlight. Okay, so what you have is, first of all, you got your ship silhouette. You got the nation symbol. Then you have the flotation, and in a way, I guess that's like the hit points, if you will. So these things actually can take quite a bit of flooding, superstructure, and things like that before they go out. Then you have the guns, how many you have, and this number times 8, at least in the introductory game that I'm playing, really doesn't have too much of an effect on the game that I've seen when I played, but the size of the gun matters. Then these numbers here on the stern, there's a 12 here. They all have, you know, this is their firepower, basically how well they are based on how many guns they have. So for example, the Hood, it's got these 2 turrets with 2 cannons each, 2 barrels each, and so that gives a firepower 12, and it's exactly the same in the front, so they have firepower 12 in the front, and then on the broadside, because they can combine the firepower, they get a 24. And then here, the Prince of Wales, it has the quadruple barrel turret on the back, so it's got firepower 10. On the front, it's got 16, because it's got the 4 barrels and then 2 additional, and then on the side, it's 26. So their firepower totals kind of make sense if you look at the numbers and how they add up. Like here's the Battleship Resolution, 11 in the rear, 11 in the front, and on the broadsides it's 22. So, you know, because 11, 11 is 22. So the firepower numbers equal out pretty well, and they make sense. Then you have here the movement, which in this case of the Prince of Wales is a 9. That's 9 movement factors. And what, if I'm remembering the scale, like 1 movement factor is about 3 knots. So this can hit like a top speed of 27 knots. And they're saying the Hood hits a top speed of about 30 knots. And then you have armor value of 12. And this is where, at least in the introductory game I'm playing, there's not a whole lot of variance to that. It's 12. Now, where do we go from here? So the combat, since we're talking mostly just primary gunnery, there's, in this introductory set, no mention of secondaries. You're just going right off the main stuff. I guess secondaries are kind of abstracted out. And in the description I was reading, they were saying that the game had kind of like the feel of like a tabletop board game, but a little more complexity than that. So this is a more advanced board game and not as complicated miniature rule set. So secondaries, I guess, got left out of there, which is fine because the Prince Eugen here, it has on a broadside an attack value of 8, and at long range that would be an attack value of 4. And then when you compare that against these other ships' armor, battleships' armors, its odds of hitting and doing anything are really, really abysmally low. You have to get like really, really close. So in my mind I'm thinking, okay, these are 8-inch guns that the Prince Eugen has. A lot of secondaries are like 6-inch, 5-inch, 4-inch. That means in order for those to have some effectiveness, you're going to have your ships really, really close together. And since a lot of the firing that I did was at far end of the table, having the secondaries not listed really didn't hurt. But again, that's why I was saying it just kind of depends what you're looking for. Are you looking for the rivets and the rivet counting and that extra detail? Or do you want something that gives you, some believable results without a lot of complication? And that's where this sits at. It's kind of those believable results without a lot of complication. So there's your ship counters, and I thought those are cool. Now, one thing that just a slight annoyance to me is there's a lot of charts throughout this book. Well, when I say a lot, there's charts. Like, let me show you here. An important chart. If I can turn this back on here. There we go. Oh, I turned it on, then turn it back off. Now, one of the charts in here, turn it off, turn it on, turn it back off, turn it on. Oh man. Of course the auto rotate broke. Hold on. Let's see if I can get to auto rotate. Nope. Well, I'm not going to spend time trying to get to auto rotate. So, for example, one of the important charts in here is this gunnery chart here for the ranges. And this is the only place it's in the book. If you go to the back of the book, it actually has a section of charts to print out. So you've got like your hit table, there's special damage table, crits, things like that. And then, oops, I bumped that. And then there's one here for narrative damage, which is kind of cool. But some of the important tables, like the range chart, wasn't in there. So I still find myself referencing this, my PDF. So what I'm going to do is actually take these charts, because if you notice the book, it's like a booklet. The book doesn't fit a full sheet of paper. So I have a lot of white space. So what I might do is go into like Word or something like that and take these little tables and just maybe stick them on the bottom here. Basically just kind of make my own charts and tables for the game. That way I have everything I need. Because the game itself is pretty easy to figure out how to play. So for example, all you gotta do is when you come back here, the sequence of play, boom, this is it. Now for example here it says setting weather and visibility. This rule is not used in the introductory game. So you see that in a few spots because again this is just introductory game, so there's a lot of things that are taken out. If you want weather and visibility, then yeah, you probably want to get the full Battleship Captain rules. So a sequence of play is broken down into 2 phases. There's a movement phase and there's a firing phase. And then you have a second movement phase and a second combat phase. At the beginning of your turn, what you do, and I'm going to move this here. I wrote down just a couple things to show you, kind of like a sample. You and your opponent will want to have, I was playing some solo stuff, so here's how I do a solo game. I tried to give you a sample here. What I do is specifically for Battle of the Bering Strait, or Denmark Strait, I have the Prince of Wales, the Hood, Bismarck, Prince Eugen. At the beginning of the turn, you put down what the movement factor for the ship is. So again, when you look at your counter, this number here on the Prince of Wales, 9, that's how many movement factors you have. And what I did was I said, I'm just going to have everybody move at 3 movement factors. So in your 2 phases, you just split that in half. So your first movement phase, you could even do something like this. 3, like if you know you want to move 3 movement factors, you could go like 1.5/1.5. Since there's 2 movement phases, I've been playing with different ways to record stuff, but that's one thing you could do. So you know when you're in the first movement phase, it's 1.5 movement points. And then if one movement phase is 2 inches, then 1.5 would mean on the table you move 3 inches. So it's not difficult to figure out movement, and that's the extent of movement plotting. It's pretty easy compared to some other games I've done. So at the beginning you just write down, we're going to use 3 movement factors. Boom, split it among the 2 movement phases. So when you move, the first thing you do is you decide who's moving the slowest, and that vessel moves first. And when you have everybody at 3, if they're tied, any ties, then there's a roll-off to see who can move first. And that means ships that are moving faster have that slight advantage because they can see where other people are going and then move according to that. And then you get to make one 45-degree turn each phase. So no more than 90 degrees of turning throughout the entire turn. So you can move turn 45 degrees in the first phase, turn 45 degrees in your second phase, so up to 90 for the whole turn. And that's fine. But again, that lets you have some more reactionary movement. So if you, again, want to move quickly, then that gives you a slight advantage because you can see how other people are moving on the board and react to that. That's fine. And because you kind of plot it out a little bit, there's no changing in the middle of the turn. You have to wait till the next turn if you want to speed up, slow down. And even that's, you just kind of change it by, I forget off the top of my head how much you can change it, but you like change your speed by like 1 or 2 movement factors. It's pretty simple. But then you can fire once per turn. So you can either fire during the first phase or fire during the second phase. And since each turn is like a couple minutes, that's really enough time for a battleship to, say, fire in the second phase of a turn and then fire in the first phase of a next turn. So there's enough, time that passes by between phases that makes sense. And the reason why you can do up to 45 degrees a turn, because again, there's like several minutes of time passes per phase. Anyhow, so you just do basic plotting. And then when you want to shoot a target, I just write down who we're shooting at. So you plot the firing. So if you want to fire, and it says you do this in secret from your opponent, right? So if I was the Prince of Wales and the Hood player, and I know we're going to shoot at the Prince Eugen, I just put an E, shooting at the Eugen. And that's all you got to do. That's it. Nothing complicated beyond that. Or I put P for Prince of Wales, because that's what the Bismarck and my Eugen were shooting at. Easy. And that's because even though movement kind of goes back and forth by the slowest person or initiative roll first, firing is simultaneously. So you just mark your target and then you can resolve all the combat, and then once all the combat results have been figured out, that's when damage is applied. That way you aren't hurting somebody's chances to do damage, in a sequential order. Some games have that. I know some people like that the damage is applied as it occurs, so initiative is important, but this game, it's all fired simultaneously. Now, that's where combat is not bad. Actually, it's not too bad, and that's where, like I said, the results, the feel is pretty good. So there's a range chart, and that's the table I wish they had in my printout here. But here's the range chart. So again, just take your handy dandy measuring tape, measure the distance between the ships, and in inches, times that by 500, because 1 inch is 500 yards, and you're going to be told based on the size of the gun. So again, it doesn't matter like how many guns are firing, you just have the size of the gun for determining like range. So if you're 13 inch, which all of these were, except for the Prince Eugen, because like here the Hood has got 15-inch guns, Prince of Wales 14-inch, Bismarck is 15-inch, and Prince Eugen is 8-inch. So we started the game at the far ends of my table, and we were sitting right around here in the I think we were 25,500 yards from each other. So we were at long range for a few turns. Now, once you have the range, there's a couple things that range affects. If you're at short range, it says right here, the ship's fire rating is doubled. If you're at medium range, then there's no modification to the ship's fire rating. And if it's medium range, medium to long, that's this third column, you roll a die 6 when you're shooting. On a 1, 2, or 3, it's counted as being at long range. If you roll a 4, 5, or 6, it's counted as medium range. And then at long range, the fire rating is half rounded up. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if we're starting out at 25,000 yards, that is long range. So for example, the Hood, when I first had the ships engaged, they would pretty much bow on to each other, and so they would use this bow rating for firing, which is a 12. Oh, here we go. Which is a 12. At long range, you take half of that. that becomes a fire rating of 6. So based on all these barrels and things I have here on the hood, fire rating of 6, I compare that to the armor of what I'm shooting at. Now the Prince Eugen had pretty weak armor. It's an armor of 4. Whereas the Bismarck has an armor of 14, Prince of Wales had an armor of 15, and the hood had an armor of 12. And again, those are just arbitrary numbers that, you know, some games they want you to know like the thickness of armor, or, you know, but most games they just assign a value, right? So that's what this is here. We've got 12, and that's no matter where you're hitting the ship, it's a 12. There are some advanced rules to cover effects of firing, like bow on or from the sides. But again, that's as you get further into the rules beyond just this basic introductory set. Again, quick play versus your rivet counting. Well, if the hood shoots at long range and I have 6 on my fire factors and the Prince Eugen has a 4 armor, that's basically on this chart, because now we've gone beyond range chart. Now we go to this fire combat table. Now see, that was on this separate thing I had printed out. Like I had everything I needed to play pretty much. I just didn't have this stupid range chart. But you just look at odds. It's an odds based. So what did I say? 6 firepower versus 4 armor. It's not quite 2 to 1 in favor of the attacker. That's actually almost a 1 to 1 there. So you can just roll on the 1 to 1 table, and you just roll a die 6. And there's only a couple modifiers. So like if your range is 6 to 12,000, it's +1. If your range is under 6,000 yards, it's a +2. If the target is a cruiser, it's a -1. If your target speed is 2 or less, +1. And if the fire were turned 45 degrees in the last movement phase, it's a -1. That's pretty much the only modifier. So you just roll a die 6. So if I'm on this 1 to 1 chart, let's say I roll a 3, just cross-reference, it's a miss. And trust me, I rolled a lot of misses because that die 6 rolls horribly. But if you roll high enough, like let's say it was reversed, it's like the Bismarck shooting at the hood on a broadside. Well, if we have Bismarck shooting broadside, he has a fire rating of 26, and eventually we got closer. I didn't get much beyond closer than like medium range. So at medium range, we're firing 26, and the hood has 12 armor. So that's 2 to 1 in favor of Bismarck. So again, I just roll that die 6, and I either get a hit. Here's like a roll again. The asterisk would just tell you, like if you had a hit with an asterisk, if the target is acquired, the result is a hit. Otherwise, it's a miss. On the roll again, if target is acquired, then roll again. Otherwise, it's a miss. Now, target acquired just means that you fired at that ship in a previous phase or a previous turn. So basically, as long as you keep shooting at a ship, it's acquired. Pretty simple concept there. Now, if you do score a hit, or like ×2, you just roll down here, and it tells you if it's like a S for superstructure, or like here it says D, or an F for flooding, or if you get an FD result. D is deck damage. Place 1 D marker on the target. For every 2 D markers on the target, place 1 additional F marker. F is your fire factors. So it's real simple how they do the damage. And they got all these markers here for you. All this confetti. This is probably the one thing that some folks are probably not going to like if you're the miniature gamer, because a lot of times miniature gamers use, oh, I've got mine hidden away, but you've got, you know, all these fancy tokens, and not tokens, but like actual things you put on the board, like, you know, those Litco fire markers and flooding, and they look really cool versus these cutout counters. I didn't mount these or anything, I just printed them and cut them out. But they work. The only thing is, when you place it next to your ship, my ships aren't mounted, and so I have to push these along with my little ship, whereas if you have your ships mounted, these fit on, I think, on the base of your ship just fine. But they have a lot of like individual F, 3F, 4F, 5F. So basically, if you get these the F for F is your flotation damage. Trying to remember what it's called. I keep calling it flooding, but it's your flotation damage. It's like your hit points. So you're gonna have a few of these at a time if you take a lot of flotation damage. So in the beginning, we only have a couple flotation damage points. You just need one marker. But as you start to accumulate 10 flotation, you're gonna have several of these stacked. Same with like T. T is for your, what do they call that? That's the turret damage. That's your ability to shoot. That affects your fire factors. So again, if you only have 1 or 2 T points, you just have a T, or, because I just threw these all together, thought we had like a 2T, and here's one. 3T, had to find it. So I could pull off some of the other T's and just replace it with the next higher number up. So hopefully at any given time you don't have a whole lot of these markers on your ship, but there can get to a point where yes, I've got several flotation hits, I have several of the turret hits, so my gunnery is affected, or I have some superstructure hits. Superstructure just says for every 3 S markers on the target, place 1 additional T marker, so your shooting gets worse. Every 2 deck, you get an additional flooding. And what I've did is, well, for flotation, because you have a flotation number, if you hit your flotation number, you're close to sinking. But for superstructure, what I did was, again, just to help cut down on bookkeeping, like here's a 2S. Once I hit 3 superstructure, I just kind of took those off and put the additional T down, or increased my T marker by 1. Again, just to try and help cut down on some of the counter clutter. Like I said, that's probably about the biggest drawback, is tracking all these counters on the ships. Again, if you have your ships mounted and you've got that base, then you can just stick these things right on the base, and it's like absolutely no problem. Especially if you're playing the game with these markers. And if you notice, if you print out these ship counters, these damage tokens fit just fine on your ship, and they don't really impede anything. And as you're moving the ship around, boom, it's easy to track your markers. I'm just saying, I don't have my Eugen or anything here, but like if I grab, let's say I was playing, who's this? Oh, let's say I've got my Iowa, for instance. Yeah. If you're playing in miniatures and they're not mounted, then it does get to be kind of a pain to have, I got my 2F, my superstructure, and I got a turret damage. I move my ship down the table a bit. Now I got to slide all these markers with it. That's the only thing that kind of sucks. But the results, though, are actually pretty good. At long range, I was missing quite a bit, and then when I did hit, it was like 1 flood point or 1 turret damage. It just, I don't know, it felt good. I think probably this might be a good one to show you on the table one day, and just kind of walk through the basic segments of how to play. And again, I haven't even touched on aircraft, torpedoes, because that's in here too. Let me get rid of these here for a second, just to show you some of the things that this basic rules do cover. So here's, like I said, the special damage. And a lot of times your hit table is going to tell you if you need to roll on something else other than just saying, hey, you got a deck damage or a turret damage or superstructure or something like that. Critical, the plunging fire, because they have rules for that too. If you're at a certain range, it might be plunging fire. Here's some internal damage you might get from a critical hit up above. And then that's kind of cool. That starts to give you some specific things that happen to the ship. One thing that's cool, before we look at more contents, is this narrative damage. Now, the narrative damage, from when I read it, it doesn't do anything different to the ship, but what it does is it's kind of cool, and it tells you, like, in a way, narratively, what's happening to cause the F damage. So like if I did cause F damage, which is your flotation, I could roll 2 dice 6 and a 3, and it says fuel bunker fire due to penetrating hit. It doesn't really like do anything extra other than it just kind of gives some story as to what is happening to your ship that causes all of these F and T and S damage. I thought that was kind of cool. You don't need it. The basic game pretty much just revolves around these 2 pages here. Your fire combat, hit table, and then the special damage, crit damage. Alright, so I keep changing the size of this here. As your required target, there's no combining fire, ships fire individually. Here's your firing aspect, again pretty simple, 45 degrees off the front to determine if it's a bow or a broadside shot. There's your flotation damage, again talking about every 3 F markers. You're going to, let's see, for each F marker a ship receives, its movement rating is dropped by 1 because your flotation damage. Let's see here, I thought there was something else. Oh yeah, when the ship is received, F marker is equal in number to its flotation rating. It is dead in the water and in danger of sinking. So flotation is a pretty important thing to keep track of. Then there's your turret damage reminder. And then here, turret fire, when T damage occurs to a ship, it will lose firepower factors from its current fire ratings. And what's kind of cool is you roll 2 dice on this little chart down below, and it will tell you based on what you rolled and the aspect of where the fire is coming into the target exactly how many firepower factors you lose off the ship. And so it's not just that you've damaged the main turret, but it could be that you hit the radar, or again, you know, if you look at the narrative damage, if I'm taking T damage, could be bridge hits, electrical lines, ventilation. There's a lot of things that could cause these numbers to happen. And again, it's just some narrative flair to it. So this is the mechanical aspect. I thought it was kind of cool that they got that little narrative aspect saying, oh, we must have damaged the ventilation, the crew is tired and hot and sweaty and now they can't concentrate. That kind of stuff is kind of cool. But this tells you how specifically your fire ratings are dwindling over time. See, just move along there. Summary of like the superstructure damage, deck damage. There's a visibility phase, but not used. And then sinking, again, if you hit that 0 flotation, it's got rules to see if you're sinking. And then the torpedoes, again, there's another chart that I would need to copy and paste. I haven't played with the torpedo rules, so I can't speak to that. The ship ratings, down here on your ship, if you got these letters, like Hood is a Z, Prince of Wales is AU, it's gold, I guess, and then a Z, ASU. And it says in the introductory game there are, a few of these ratings, but the full game has like more ratings. So as ships with a special Z rating have inferior deck and or internal protection for a ship of its size and suffer penalties of +1 die roll modifier to any special damage table rolls and +1 to internal damage table rolls they make. Grofspey is an example of ships with a Z rating. Oh, nice. So you want to keep an eye on those special ratings for your ships. Here's some rules on the narrative damage table I was telling you about. And there they are. Now see, they had that together to print out. That was good. And then here's an example, extended example of play. I'm trying to think how to say that. And then it says right here, advanced rules options. Advanced rules are not used in the introductory game. These are included in the full Battleship Captain 3rd edition system. An example of some of the advanced rules. Weather, night combat, extreme range, low ammunition, fire control coordination, command and control coordination, stationary targets, reverse movement, destroyers, small ships, merchants, and AMC, whatever the AMC is, optional fire damage, advanced weather, advanced visibility, squalls, torpedo effectiveness, current conditions, scuttling. So yeah, like I said, this is an introductory game. It's really just focusing on the gunnery and applying damage to the ships. So overall, if I was going to say, like, how does this compare to other games? I've played a few Naval World War II rule sets now, and my favorites are General Quarters 3 and Naval Thunder. And if you're familiar with those 2 rule sets, this is easier than Naval Thunder. Naval Thunder has kind of a simplistic game as well, but it has more crunch to it. Like, it does track your secondaries, and it has nice rules for submarine warfare and aircraft that happens like before the tactical engagement phase. And I just don't know how aircraft and subs and things like that will work here because that's not part of the introductory stuff. But as far as just moving the ships, shooting at each other, generating flotation hits and things like that. This works really good. I think this would be a good game for, you know, someone who's starting to learn and get into miniature wargaming. And then once you've had that, you know, you could probably move up to Naval Thunder and eventually on to like General Quarters. And then of course there's, you know, the more complicated systems like Command at Sea and things like that, which this doesn't even come close to those on complexity. So again, if you're just looking to kind of get into it and you don't even have ship models, I think the Battleship Captain system and just get the Battle of the River Plate, again, that was like maybe $10 off Wargame Vault, and it's got enough ships to do the Battle of the River Plate, Denmark Strait, and then it's got some other stuff here, Dunkirk, some French ships, some more British ships. What do we got here? Yeah, the Gough Spey, Ajax, Cumberland, and Admiral Hipper, Sussex, Renown, Achilles, Exeter. So that gives you a few things to play with. I was looking to see... Oh, the Resolution. So if I remember right, the Resolution... Or was it Renown? I don't remember. Like the Renown and the Prince of Wales, I think those were they were sunk in the Malay. So you could do like the convoy type action there, and hopefully they survive. But it gives you plenty to play with. And then of course the full rules gives you more ships, and then the ship counter book gives you even more. That's about as detailed as I can get on an introductory set of rules. So if you have any questions or comments, or if you've played this system, and you know, tell me what you think. But that's about all I got for that one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good night. Bye.